Picture yourself in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. You're killing and doing everything you can to survive day to day. Now, imagine that you not only have to take care of yourself, but 11 kindergarten kids too. Little Monsters is a 2019 dark comedy / zombie film directed by Ep.4. Yes, it is a Hulu original, but because we don't get Hulu over here in the GCC for whatever reason, thanks a lot Hulu, I had to watch it in the theaters on its very short run while I was here in Qatar. The film stars Black Panther's Oscar-winning actress Lupita Nyong'o as Mrs. Caroline. It also features the always hilarious Josh Gad as Teddy McGiggles, a kids' TV show host. And last but not least, it features Alexander England as Dave, a kind of loser musician. The film has a pretty fun premise, kind of in the vein of like Shaun of the Dead, Zombieland, or Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse. Basically, Dave, a loser musician, has hit rock bottom, but he agrees to take his nephew on a field trip as a chaperone just so that he can scam on the kid's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Caroline. Unfortunately, while they are enjoying their field trip to a local farm, they run into a horde of the undead. So not only do Miss Caroline and Dave have to keep these 11 kindergarten students safe from the hordes of the undead, they also have to contend with a basically insane kids TV show host. The story and the relationship between Dave, Miss Caroline, and the kids has a great balance of horror and heart. And you really get to enjoy that connection because the film takes its time in the first act to establish that relationship and to let you know who these people are. Most of the first act is the pretty hilarious but kind of depressing story of Dave and his relationships with his girlfriend and his family, and basically the world in general. The main characters and some of the key children are really fleshed out. You get to know them before the crap really hits the fan, and that definitely aids in your emotional connection to them. Well, at least as much as you can connect to people in the midst of a foul-mouthed dark comedy. It's not like this is some kind of serious drama. So the premise and story are pretty good. How does it look? Let's get to cinematography. Unlike most zombie films, almost the entire runtime takes place in the great outdoors. So it's very colorful, bright, and vibrant, and aids in that warm feeling that the movie and the kids are supposed to make you feel. The whip-smart editing is nicely done, whether it be the action scenes where it's supposed to feel fast and frantic, or the more heartfelt or serious moments where you're supposed to take a little bit of time to think about what's happening and to connect with people. Either way, the editing works for both of those scenarios. There are quite a few dynamic shots done by cranes or drones that really put you in the middle of all of these zombies. Because this is a dark comedy more than anything else, you see a ton of reaction shots and a lot of punch-ins for details that are important, whether it be for jokes or for the more serious moments, and either way, it works effectively. The zombie sounds and the other sound effects are pretty solid, but the real star of the movie here is the music. And I'm not talking about the score or the soundtrack, I'm talking about when Miss Caroline or Dave are singing to the kids. There are quite a few musical numbers in the film, but it's not a musical. Definitely don't get that twisted. If it was a musical, I wouldn't have been there watching it. All the songs they perform in the movie are basically there to help calm down the kids or keep them distracted, and that's pretty realistic. I have a ton of musician friends, and every time they perform something and there are kids around, those kids basically zone everything else out and they just focus on the musician and their tunes. When the score does kick in, it's usually there to emphasize dramatic or scary moments, and it does help push those moments forward. Now let's get to that world-building spookiness. The world building in this movie is pretty damn effective because, like I said earlier, this movie spends the entire first act getting you familiar with the characters, their predicaments, and their dynamic with one another. We get to know Dave, a foul-mouthed slacker who you really won't expect much from. We get to know Miss Caroline, who is a cute and caring teacher with a penchant for singing songs to the kids, but she doesn't seem like she'll be able to do much to defend the kids during a zombie apocalypse. We get to know Teddy McGiggles, who seems like a caring kids show host, who probably will be able to help keep the kids calm and maybe take care of them during the zombie outbreak. Of course, any expectations that you have of these characters tends to be subverted at one key point or another during the runtime of this movie. With the whole point of this world or this premise being that they have to take care of these kids, there is going to be a lot of stuff on screen with the children. Luckily, they perform pretty well too, and everything that happens with the kids tend to be cute, or funny. I love the fact that the movie is self-aware. There are quite a few jokes about the zombie genre and why the American military would be involved or why it would even be in Australia. And I also like that a lot of the exposition or the backstories of the characters comes off in an organic way. As someone who was in the military, I know how it is when you are in tense situations and you have to sit around for a long time. You tend to talk about things from your past or things that you miss or stuff that you want to try if you ever get out of there. And again, that adds to the authenticity of this world, especially for a dark comedy. So the world building is good, but how are the scares? First off, it's a zombie film, so how do the zombies look and are they menacing? First off, it's a zombie film, so how do the zombies look? Are they menacing? How are the makeup effects? The ones that originate from the military base look awesome. The new zombies, of course, are kind of just surface level makeup effects. They're not super impressive, but they get the job done. As I said earlier, this movie reminds me of like Shaun of the Dead or Zombieland or Scout's Guide to the Apocalypse, but unlike those movies, I never really felt a true sense of dread or worry for any of the characters. I always felt like they were going to make it. Now that's not true for the entire film. There are a couple moments where you kind of start to worry for somebody, but you still have that feeling that they're going to be okay. When it comes to props or jump scares or whatever, there are quite a few that are set up and you see them coming and they're kind of obvious, so it does take away from the tension, it does take away from the scare factor. While it does have a great balance of heart and horror, it never quite finds the right balance of fear and funny, especially when compared to its contemporaries.
And now the moment we've all been waiting for is here.
We're out of time.
It's Judgment Day.
While I did love the foul-mouthed nature of the film, the dark humor, and the premise, there was so much to love about this movie. It was absolutely destroyed by censorship. There were 14 cuts that I saw in this movie. There was only one kiss in this movie, and that was cut out. I could have been okay with that if it hadn't been at a key moment in the finale where there's something that happens in the background of this kiss. So that gets cut and you see all of the people reacting to it on screen and you're like, what are they reacting to? Because you didn't get to see it because that cut. So if there's only one scene of kissing, there's no nudity, why all of the other cuts? Why 13 more cuts for censorship? I don't know if it was Gulf Films, the people who distributed it, or if it was somebody at the ministry or whatever, but obviously somebody didn't like the fact this movie was a dark comedy with raunchy humor. So the other 13 cuts were usually revolving around some type of dirty joke, or they start to tell a story, maybe about something that they did before the zombie apocalypse and why it was bad and why they regret it, and of course it gets cut. So not only do you lose the emotional impact of that moment, you don't get to hear the joke. There's this jarring cut and you're like, what the hell just happened? I walked out so frustrated. So while this movie might be a 7 out of 10 on Hulu, and I highly recommend that you watch it on there, if you live in the GCC, do not pay good money to go see this movie. It is ruined by censorship, and that is why I'm giving it a 2 out of 10.